Okay, hello everyone and welcome. My name is Maddy Gillette and I work as a children's librarian with the Los Angeles Public Library. I'm so excited to be hosting the Authors in Conversation portion of today's Judy Lopez Memorial Awards celebration. I imagine many of you have just come from watching the virtual event on YouTube, and let me start with a huge thanks for our selection committee for their hard work and to Hope Anita Smith for hosting our virtual ceremony. But allow me also to give a brief background of the award for anyone who is not familiar. The Judy Lopez Memorial Award is a national book award honoring outstanding literature for ages 9 to 12 each year since 1986. The award is named for Judy Lopez, one of the founding members of the Women's National Book Association, Los Angeles, and a fervent advocate for early literacy. I'm so excited to be joined by three of our award winners and honors authors who I'd like to introduce today. I'm going to start out Christina Wyman. Christina Wyman is the author of our Judy Lopez Memorial Award medalist, Jawbreaker, her debut novel. She works as a teacher and as a writer and has written for publications including New York Magazine, The Washington Post, The Independent, and other outlets. Welcome, Christina. Is there anything you'd like to add to that introduction?
Thank you. Just thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Maddy.
Thank you. I'd also like to introduce Tara Dairman. Tara Dairman is the author of The Girl from Earth's End, one of our Judy Lopez Memorial Award honors titles, as well as several other books for children, including Desert Girl, Monsoon Boy, a picture book illustrated by Archana Srinivasan, which was honored as a Kirkus Best Picture Book of the Year. Welcome, Tara. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Thanks, Maddy. Hi, Christina. Hi, Michelle. Congratulations.
And then finally, I'd like to introduce Michelle Cuevas. Michelle Cuevas is the award-winning author of 8 books for young people, including the Judy Lopez Memorial Award honors book, The Dreamatics. Her books have been named the Best of the Year by Time, People, the Boston Globe, Kirkus, and School Library Journal, and have been translated into over 20 languages, as well as various theatrical productions. Welcome, Michelle. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Right. No, that was great. Thanks, Maddy. Here's the book, The Dramatics. And yeah, congrats, you guys. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Amazing. I'd also like to acknowledge, unfortunately, Sarah Everett could not join us for today's live conversation, but we're also so proud to honor her book, The Probability of Everything, one of our JLMA honors titles. So as far as kind of starting our conversation, let's begin at the beginning. I would love to hear from each of you kind of what the seed of your story was, or kind of when you decided that you wanted to write it. Can we start out? Let's kind of go in that same introduction order. If we can start out with Christina.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Actually, it's I don't think it started out in the typical way. In terms of I have an idea for a children's book, and then I'm going to try to write that idea. This actually started out as an essay for adults in the Washington Post. And I just wrote this whole essay about sort of life with a malocclusion. Anyone who has had braces, or even if you haven't had braces, everyone has a malocclusion of some sort. And I had a severe one as a kid. So it led to 3 rounds of braces, a round of surgery. And during the pandemic, when we all had to wear a mask in public spaces, I actually really enjoyed that. Of course, there's the public health component, but then there was also the aesthetic component where I'm like, okay, I can just hide my face, and that feels really good. So I wrote this essay. The Washington Post picked it up, and from there, I met my editor with Macmillan, who said, we need to turn this into a book. And it turns out I just had the story in me. I didn't even know that I had the story in me until she and I met. So that's how my book came to be. It was a very circuitous kind of thing, starting out with writing for adults.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Tara, would you like to speak to your beginning?
Sure. So I have been lucky enough to travel to more than 90 countries around the world. And a lot of my stories get inspired by setting first, which I don't think is very typical. Oftentimes it's character or plot that comes to authors first, but I often travel somewhere and experience a really cool, interesting setting, and then my brain starts coming up with story ideas that could fit into that place. And I was planning a family trip to the Azores, which are a string of islands in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, very isolated. They are part of the country of Portugal, but they're located more than 1,000 miles off the coast of mainland Portugal. And the more I learned as I was researching the history of these islands, I learned that there were many beautiful gardens there. I learned that they had grown the most oranges of anywhere in the world back in the 1800s, but then a disease moved through and killed all the orange trees and the whole industry disappeared. And little details from my research and then from my visit there started to spark my imagination to write this story about a girl who is an expert gardener and then faces a situation where she has a very sick parent and finds out about a plant that she thinks if she could get the seed and she could grow it, she might be able to save her papa's life with it. But it's almost extinct. It might be completely extinct. And also it has to grow on an orange tree. And the orange trees have all been wiped out in this fantasy world that I made up that is loosely based on the Azores. So yeah, the first germs of it came from a trip of mine, which is pretty typical for me.
I love that. Oh, that sounds so beautiful. And Michelle, if you want to talk about yours as well?
Yeah, of course. So my book, The Dream Addicts, it's a combination of the word dreams and the word dramatic. And that's because it's about a theater that acts out the nightly dreams of a little girl. So I think the first germ for it I really like high concept ideas and things like that. And I think as I said in my video earlier, I started taking medicine for anxiety, and this was a couple years ago, and I was having very wild dreams, like wilder than usual. And you wake up and everyone has wild dreams, and you think, where did that come from? Like what's going on in there? So basically I was like, what is going on in there? And so that was kind of the fun place I went with that. And I realized I hadn't really seen anything or read anything about that kind of like and so I was also a theater nerd, so I decided to set it in a theater, the Lunarian Grand, named after our main character Luna Grande. So yeah, that was kind of it. And then I sort of folded in my dogs. So I have two Bernese mountain dogs, Indy and Fable, and I think that in the story, I don't want to give too much away, but she does suffer a loss. And I think it was kind of me dealing with these two dogs are my first dogs I've ever had because my brother had asthma growing up. So I haven't had like that loss yet. So I think I was sort of, I think sometimes when you write, you sort of are practicing emotions. I think, well, kids are when they're reading it too. So that was part of it too, for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And kind of as we go forward to feel free to jump in with each other. And our audience is also welcome to submit questions in the chat or the Q&A portion. Kind of following up on what that initial like seed or germ of the story was for you all. I am curious kind of in a way of why you chose to tell it as you did for this audience. So the Judy Lopez Memorial Award specifically honors middle grade novels best for ages 9 to 12 years old. And this is such a special audience living in the transition between childhood and teenage years. So I'm curious kind of what drew each of you to write for kind of this age group or tell this story for this age group. If we want to start maybe with Kara.
Sure. So all of my novels are middle grade. So I feel like that is the age personally where like I can so easily slip back into the emotions and the feeling of being that age. Because like you said, it is such a time of transition. And for me, some of those memories and feelings are imprinted so deeply on me that, I don't think I was the most exciting teenager. I just spent a lot of time studying. So I don't have a lot of fantastic YA stories in the bank, but those middle grade years had their challenges and had their triumphs. So I feel like I can constantly draw from that. So I love writing these 10, 11, 12-year-old protagonists. And just, yeah, like you said, they're going through that important transition in life. And there's just so much richness to explore in there. So I love writing middle grade.
I love that. Yeah, they're kind of getting so much about the world, I think. I feel like those stories inspired by travel is a really interesting place to be setting that. Let's see, Michelle, do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah. You know what's interesting? I wrote my first book. It was a middle grade book. This was like, 10 more years ago. And it was while I was getting my MFA in fiction writing. And so that's really writing short stories for adults and everything. And I didn't love it. It was kind of, I was like, everyone would always ask, oh, this doesn't really seem real enough. And I found myself writing a lot of magic and like talking plants and just like weird things. So I wrote my first novel about a painting elephant that I held in his trunk. And I was like, oh, this is much more fun. So I didn't really even know, what it was when I submitted it. I just knew it was something in the children's arena. And I think that I've kind of tucked into middle grade because I think it's for like of all the book types, I think it's the one that's for the most ages. Like I think like I have friends who read their, toddlers and kindergartners and young kids chapters before bed, and then you have kids that are starting to read themselves. I think tons of adults read them, and I feel like they're kind of for everyone, which I think is kind of rare and wonderful. Yeah. So I like reading middle grade. I like writing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right with it having a very broad audience. And we see that in the library that we have all kinds of people coming for those middle grade books. Christina, I'm definitely interested, especially since yours started out as a work for adults. How did that become this amazing middle grade story?
This is a really hard question to take last because Tara and Michelle said it just so much better than I could have. What I will say is that out of any other time in my life, it's just the time I think about most. That sort of 9 years old to about 13, 14 years old. There's just something about that time frame that is so impactful in terms of the good, the bad, and the ugly. I write a lot about trauma and bullying and friendships and family, and there's just something about that age, that period of time, that headspace that we're in. I think Tara said that it's what she pulls from most, and it's just where my headspace goes. I can write really short essays for adults, but I could not imagine what a book for an adult would be. I don't think I have whatever it is that allows adult writers to create something for that audience. But for a 12-year-old, I just have a lot of that to draw from as well. It was just such an impactful time. That's really all I could say about it.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. That is such a special, like unusual time that's kind of different than any other part of your life. And from what all three of you kind of have said, you've all kind of put aspects of yourself and your own experiences into your books. I'm curious kind of to hear about what that writing process looks like, especially when you're taking some of the experiences that are maybe really hard and translating them into this more fictionalized story, kind of what that looked like for you. Is it something that is a really emotional process? Yeah, I'm kind of curious about that experience. Let's see, maybe Michelle, would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like I think it's a really beautiful process. I find it very cathartic. I think it was my fourth novel was called The Care and Feeding of a Pet Black Hole. And that one was about a little girl who had lost her father, and then she gets followed home by a pet black hole named Larry, short for singularity. And she basically tries to throw all of her, problems into it, like homework and things like that. But then she also starts throwing memories for dad. And so anyway, she has to eventually go inside the black hole to retrieve something. And I feel like that's a good example of a time when I had lost my stepfather. This was in 2014. And so it was about a year later when I was writing the book. And I just had the idea of it's a book about a pet black hole. And then I realized the metaphor and what it was really about. And I feel like it was such a, like, it honestly, I mean, I was in real therapy too, don't worry, but it was a very therapeutic process of, just kind of, you kind of figure it out as you're going along too. So, and you sort of turn, your grief and pain and all of that into this like thing shaped like a book. And then you go out and you meet people and they've had similar experiences. So, yeah, I think it can be, very beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you have kind of, it seems, a theme around memory through some of your books. I think that's really interesting as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Christina, yours is kind of the most like clearly autobiographical in some ways. You've got in your author's note right at the beginning, you talk about your own experiences. And so I'm definitely curious how taking so much of that directly and fictionalizing it for Max's life, how that worked for you.
Yeah, I think there are a few things to say about that. I think middle grade writers in general are perpetual 12-year-olds. I just don't think there's a way of getting out of that reality. There's an inner 12-year-old that is just kind of dying to break free, maybe in a way that was not available to them all those years ago. So there's that piece, definitely the inner 12-year-old with something to say. But I think it was also a way to confront certain situations. I do want to reiterate, it's not a memoir. It's absolutely not a memoir. There are things that happen in the book that could not have happened in 1992, texting, electronics, all of those things. It could not have happened. That said, I think for me, I just wanted to create a different ending, a different outcome for some of the things that I did have direct experience with. And, just a way to really confront history that is available in writing literature for children, I think.
Yeah, I think that that's really beautiful to be able to show children kind of those positive outcomes. I think that's something really lovely about middle grade, is that we had there's so much hope in it. And I think that all three of your books really showcase that really beautifully. Tara, did you want to talk about your experience with kind of writing from your life as well?
Yeah, sure. So people would probably be surprised to hear that The Girl from Earth's End is my most personal book, because it has the most magic and it's set in this very specific sort of fantasy world. So it might not seem like it is very much based on reality at first, but my mom was sick while I was writing this book, and we kind of knew that she was heading toward the end of her life. And I think it was Michelle who said earlier that writing gives you a chance to practice having certain emotions, right? And I think this was a chance for me to do that. But something that that I did in this book, there are 3 kid characters, and all 3 of them only have dads, right? Like one of them is adopted by 2 dads. One of them, their mother died, and one of them, their mother has left. And I think that the way I was able to write honestly about some of the emotions I was going through in real life was to change that detail and not have there be any mothers in the book. That it probably would have been a little too close to home for me to write about somebody who was losing their mother. So I changed that. And it would have been too close, for me to set it in my hometown or even in our real world. So by putting it in this made up, fantastical, slightly magical world, those types of things gave me enough distance to be able to make the emotions be true while all of those other details were made up.
Yeah, and I think that bringing that personal in with the fantastical is what really gives the book a lot of heart. It gives it kind of this really amazing emotional grounding that I think all three of your books really have these beautiful emotional groundings in kind of these experiences of bullying and grief and family illness that feel very true, and that many kids kind of in the appropriate age range have experienced, but that many have not as well, kind of giving a window in there. I'm curious how you all approach kind of giving these emotional experiences while still having it be aimed at this younger age group, whether that was something that you gave consideration to in your writing, how you kind of approached that. Yeah. Do you want to maybe start, Christina?
So if I understand the question, it's really about how we're dealing with the emotional experience of it while translating it for...
Yeah, I think kind of giving these big emotions, writing them for this younger age group is kind of what I'm curious about.
Yeah, you know, the age group is big emotions. I taught middle school. I was surrounded by big emotions and on a daily basis. And now I work in high schools in a different capacity. And I mean, you can just feel it in the air. That's just what that time is. So, and again, it does kind of go back to that inner 12-year-old, you know. I can't say for sure that I have an answer to this question because like Michelle, I want to give a shout out to therapy. I don't know that Jawbreaker would have existed pre-therapy. So I did write it during and after. And I think that there's a certain kind of processing involved in that experience, but there's also a lot of processing that hasn't been accomplished, that you don't know hasn't been accomplished until maybe you are writing your book. So I don't really know how to answer that except to say that yes, there are a lot of big emotions that you know, I don't want to entirely locate it in that age group because I must have also been feeling those big emotions in order to be able to create something with them. So I think it was just a really iterative process. Like, it's in me and it's on the page, and it's in me and it's on the page, and that's just kind of, and it's in therapy, you know. It's like it was just this really iterative kind of circular, weird, complicated, you know. That's what I have. Sorry. I don't know.
No, I think that makes total sense, that, you know, to include the feelings that you did, the emotional grounding that you did, because it's real, because that's what they're experiencing. Yeah, and that's what you were feeling then, and to some extent now. Yeah, I love that. Tara, would you like to add anything to that as well?
Yeah, sure. The one thing I can add is just going off of what Christina said. I completely agree. Like, kids don't usually filter their emotions the way adults do in real life. Like, they will much more often let out their frustration. They'll yell, they'll cry. So in a way, I find it easier to write big emotions when I'm writing for a younger audience. And also, a lot of the characters in my books are kids who are trying to take on some kind of adult role, maybe sooner than they should in their lives. Like, my All Four Stars books are about a kid who secretly becomes a restaurant critic for a big newspaper, and the people who hired her don't know that she's only a kid because she's such a good writer and foodie. And it's a big adventure for her, but also is way more responsibility than a 12-year-old should have. And she's one of those like very mature, gifted kind of 12-year-olds. But part of her journey in those books is to learn how to calm down and have fun and be a kid, even while she has this talent and has these responsibilities. And I think the same is true for Henna also. She kind of gets it in her mind that she's this expert gardener, and she's the one who has the skills to find this plant and save her dad's life. And that's a big responsibility to put on yourself. And part of her journey is learning to make friends for the first time and lean into her own passions and just be a kid. And even while, you know, accepting that this hard thing is going on in her life. So Yeah, and one more thing I'll do is give a shout out to young readers, because they might not filter their emotions, but they don't really filter their opinions either. So if you hear from a young reader that they loved your book, you know they're not like making that up to be extra nice to you or something, because they'll just tell you if they didn't, or they won't say anything, right? So I love how honest kids are with their emotions and with their reactions in that middle grade age.
Yes, absolutely. The emotional honesty is so fun. Giving books to kids in the library, and they'll take a look at it and be like, I don't want to read that. I'm like, thank you for telling me. And now let's find you something you do want to read.
I wish I was better at doing that with my TBR and just saying, you know what, this isn't for me.
Right. Actually, I think it's a lesson that all of us can take. Michelle, do you want to add anything onto that as well?
Sure. I think, well, in this book, I feel like I kind of went through with the character the stages of trauma. So what I did was I sort of had the theater going through it as well, because the theater is such a character. So, you know, the theater starts out like glowy and magical, and then it'll redecorate itself at certain points, but it becomes very like dark and candlelit and cobwebs and all sorts of things like that. So I think there's that aspect to kind of set the emotions in a more personified way. But I also think that, I think that children are just people. I mean, they're, you know, I think that when I'm writing the emotional parts, or really kind of trying to think like, what's the, you know, because there's so many layers to everything. What's like, you know, the layer under the layer under the layer. It's kind of, you want to get to the center, this heart of it. And usually I just think about what to me is the center and the heart of it. And I know that it wasn't, you know, different than that when I was that age. I assume I won't be that much different. You know, you have more experiences, but sort of that thing that tugs at you and sort of just like sits right there hasn't really changed. So I a lot of times I will think of other people's artwork that have brought it out in me, and then I will sort of try to almost a little forensically think of, well, what was it about it? Like what was like the real kernel of it? What was the moment? I had a book I wrote a while back about an imaginary friend, and I was like, oh, this really reminds me of that feeling when you listen to Puff the Magic Dragon. And I was like, okay. And I listened to it a bunch being like, but what is it? And I realized it was the moment when it says that, you know, dragons don't live forever. I was like, okay, so that is it. Like, so I think there's always that sort of this thing that's sort of this, I don't know, I guess I would call it like this like distilled kind of center that you just have to like get to. How do you get there? Like what does it to you? And then figure out how to put that into your own art, I guess. Complicated answer.
No, I love that. I think like finding that in other works and trying to figure out how to bring it into your own absolutely is such an amazing way of going about it. I love the idea of bringing out, what does Puff the Magic Dragon make me feel like? It's incredible.
Yeah.
I do also, and I believe that Tara, you touched on this a little bit in your awards acceptance video, especially since your book features some prominent queer characters. But I think that we all know that in the last few years, there's been a huge rise, especially for the middle grade age, in books being challenged or banned in libraries and schools across the nation. And this has been especially the case for books featuring characters of color and LGBTQIA characters. But also that books are getting challenged just for including topics that people think are too mature for young people, including some of these like emotional, resonant kind of aspects to them that we've just been talking about. And so I'm curious what it's been like for you three to be writing and promoting literature for young people in this environment, if it's affected you in your process at all, kind of what that's been like as three amazing middle grade writers. I don't know if maybe we want to start. Michelle, if you've got any thoughts.
Sure. None of my books have been banned, but I certainly have followed a lot of the kind of the story, and I know like all of our publishers have had a lot of, you know, discussions, and we'll do a lot of like online talks and things. So I feel like we're all educated, but I don't know that we always know like what to do. You know, so I think, you know, promoting those books and just talking about it and things is helpful. And I always in my books, I don't know if there's even a word for it, but I also have, my book also has her two dads. And I think it's twofold. I think just like it'd be super fun to have two dads. I don't, but and I also think that it's just I really enjoy when it's in a book and it's not the central like thing that's going on in their lives, because all of my, LGBTQ friends and relatives, it's not always the central thing in your life. Like it can come up here and there, but a lot of times there's other big emotions and things. And so it's just a part of your life that's quite natural. And so I do like it when, I like to do it in my books. And I like when other people do in their books, where I think it's almost just kind of this like casual, that's our lives inclusion, which is how it does feel a lot of the time in life. And I think that the more that's done in just all books, it'll just start to be like, well, this is the world as it is. This is the world we live in. So there's obviously, I love it. I love it if that's what the book's about, then if that's the truth it gets to, that's beautiful as well. But I do think there's something to having it be just sort of representative of kind of all the experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I apologize. Didn't mean to neglect to mention your book as well, because I do love her dad's. Christina, did you want to add anything on this as well?
Yeah, I am a firm believer in the idea that if you are making people uncomfortable, you're probably doing something that needs to happen. So the fact that these conversations exist, as much as I hate them, the pushback that writers receive from these fringe groups, I think just they reveal to us how necessary the conversations in our books are. I do not have any direct experience with banning so far. I can say that in Jawbreaker, there is a minor character with two dads. I do know that has gotten some attention by some people. I did see it mentioned on a website somewhere. It was sort of like a, caution, there are two dads in Jawbreaker. It was something like that. I try not to give it a whole lot of air, a whole lot of headspace. I really try. In Slouch, my upcoming book, I deal with sexism in a way that I know is going to make people angry. I don't know if it's because I'm 44 and I've lived enough life to where I just don't have the energy. I don't care. If it makes people angry, I don't care, because what happens in that book is real. And what happens in that book happens to 12-year-olds in terms of 12-year-old girls in particular, in terms of sexual harassment, sexism, in terms of their bodies suddenly becoming public property. That's a real conversation. It needs to happen. It comes in the aftermath of Me Too. It needs to happen. And if it makes people angry, that they should examine where their big feelings are coming from. It's just not my job to give that airspace,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that just being out here and telling these stories is, we're all very grateful to all of you for being able to do that, and for the kind of bravery involved in saying, I don't actually care what everyone else thinks. Tara, I'm curious also how you have experienced this and feel about it.
Yeah. So I don't know if 44 is a magical age or something, but that's my age too. And I also don't care anymore to kowtow to, to what anyone else is looking for or thinks should be present in these books. I really like what Michelle said about including diversity casually in these stories. And that's something I really wanted to do in The Girl from Earth's End, like have multiple queer characters who just get to be themselves and go on part of this adventure and not have their queerness be the focus of the story. And I love stories that dig into that or dig into racism or sexism and deal with those issues head on. And those are really important too. But I do think it's so important for us to include kids and identities of all types in our stories, casually, like Michelle said. And I think, if we can put a call out to other authors right now, one of the biggest things we can be doing to push back against these bans and censorship attempts is to not censor ourselves and to not say, you know what, I'm not going to give this character two moms, because then it's going to get pulled off the shelf in these states, or it's not going to get to be up for the big award in this state that's more conservative. So that can be a great first step, because if we all just keep doing it and keep writing inclusively and reflecting the world that's around us and the communities that are around us in our stories, then, like Michelle said, the tide will be too great, right? They can't ban everything. I hope, right? Specifically with The Girl from Earth's End, I've had a bit of pushback. I had a school visit where a parent was upset that I mentioned the word gender fluid on a postcard that I handed out about the book. I didn't even talk about the book or mention the characters. I was giving a writing workshop, but I sent home postcards about the book launch. And they were upset that I exposed their upper elementary kid to the concept of gender fluidity by mentioning this character. But when I made up the promotional materials for this book, I wanted it to say in the summary that there was a gender fluid character and that there were two dads, because I don't want to hide anything about this book. I'm not trying to sneak anything over on anyone. Like, these are the characters. They are part of this story. And I'm going to put it on the postcards and put it in the book flap and everything like that. So I had a bit of that. I've heard things about it being challenged in a couple of schools in other places. I imagine that the bigger problem is what is called shadow banning, where teachers and librarians just might, read the summary and they don't want to deal with the pushback from the parents, so they just don't buy the book and put it on the shelf in the first place. And we can't quantify that happening, And I have so much sympathy for these teachers and educators and librarians, because their jobs are so hard, and to deal with this kind of challenge on top of everything else that they do for kids, they shouldn't have to deal with that drama either. But when I talk to groups of librarians and teachers, I just try to remind them that we're all on the same side here. We're all trying to get good stories out to kids. We're trying to provide those mirrors to kids who need them, and those windows to kids who need to see a world a little bit different maybe from the one that they're growing up in. So I'm impressed with everyone who's pushing back against this, from the librarian side, the teacher side, the author side, the publisher side, and I hope we'll all keep up with the good fight.
Very well
Absolutely.
said.
Yeah, so beautifully said. I think that the idea of not censoring ourselves, from top to bottom, from our authors, including the work that they want to see on the page, to teachers and librarians standing by the kinds of work that they want to see in their classrooms, even if it is, if they are worried that it could be challenged. I think that that's work that all of us can be doing, and I think that you said it so perfectly and beautifully. A slightly different note, especially kind of touching on some of the school visits, getting to meet with some of our kids who are actually reading these. I know one of the questions that we get asked most often about writers is, how did you start to become a writer? When did you realize that's what you wanted to do? What did that look like for each of you? Let's see, maybe we start with Tara? Not sure. I've lost track of my little roundabout now.
No worries. So you want to know how we became writers in the first place?
Yeah.
I mean, I just started as a reader, as someone who loved reading and stories. I think I was in 4th grade when I tried to write my first novel. And I would put chapters in the mail to my teacher. Thank goodness, she was so nice. Over the summer, she said I could send her my novel chapters. So I sent them in the mail, because that's how old I am. We didn't have email or anything. And that worked for a few months till I got a bright, shiny new idea. And I abandoned the first novel and went chasing after the new idea. And that pattern repeated itself until I was, 30-something years old. And I finally finished writing my first middle grade novel, which took 7 years. So You learn by doing and trying and sometimes failing and sometimes putting stuff down and doing other stuff. I also wrote plays for a while. I wrote screenplays, and those experiences really help me now with dialogue and with character. So no experience is wasted, I think. But it was just being a reader and loving books from a pretty young age that sent me down this career path.
I love that. I'm so charmed by the idea of your fourth grade teacher opening these chapters in the mail each week over the summer. That's adorable. Michelle, do you want to speak to how you became a writer?
That's very cute. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, okay, so I have three brothers. And growing up, my older brother, he would take every opportunity he could to like very loudly exclaim that I was the weirdest person he'd ever met. And first of all, like how many people had he met? But also, I think that I guess I was sort of like I'm an introvert, and you know, I guess I have weird interests, or I don't know, but it's one of those things where as you get older, you're like, I wonder if there's a job that I could do that is specifically for this. And I think I found it, and it's like it's perfect. So in that way, I think, I was always a writer at heart, and very similar. I was always writing when I was a kid. I had like the little family newspaper, what's going on in the neighborhood, like the neighbor's cat, whatever. I don't even know. And writing little books and things. So yeah, I think you're like, as a child, you read books and they're these like magical, amazing, huge thing. Right. And I have to remember that whenever I do school visits, because I don't think we ever had an author visit. We always had like magicians and like the guy with the iguanas, but if an author had come to my school, I would have lost it. Like I would have just been like, this is the biggest celebrity I'll ever meet. So I try to like whenever I sign books at schools and things, I try to have like a little interaction with each of them, and write something personal, because you're like, this, it would have been such a big deal. And so that's so exciting. So yeah, I think I was always a little writer. And then you go through that phase where you're like, this is not a viable option. It's going to be too hard. And then I don't know. I mean, I'd be interested to hear from everyone else, just like at what age were you like, tack with it? I'm just gonna. For me, it was my college roommate and I. We moved to Key West, Florida, like a gap year between college and grad school, and we worked in an art gallery. And it was just such a weird, fun place, but it was also a place where there was tons of artists and a lot of people, those people who kind of got fed up with like reality and like whatever reality they had chosen. So they were like, that's it, I'm moving to the southernmost point of this road, I'm just going to drive on it. And they kind of got to this place, I feel like, both in their lives and metaphorically, where they were kind of like, I'm going to just do whatever I want. Like I'm going to be an artist, a sculptor, a writer, whatever. And I think that was kind of where I realized that there's lots of like world within this world, and you can sort of choose them. And that's when I applied to go get my MFA. So I think, so I guess that was what, like 23, 24, when I was like, I'm going to see if this is like an actual thing that you can do.
Yeah, I love that so much. I think that you kind of have to come to the point of like, oh, this is a real option. That this is something that real people do, rather than having that child. We've so many kids who are like, all writers are either dead or these unapproachable kinds of people. Yeah. And
there's you go to a library, a bookstore, there's so many books. You're like, well, a lot of people are doing it. Maybe I can do, kind of feeling.
Love that. Christina, how about you? How did you come into being a writer?
If I can just do one thing first, because it's sort of, it kind of relates. There are 3 little girls from New Jersey who happen to be my nieces. I just learned that they're watching me. So I want a shout out to Jamie, Jenna, and Jessica. I love you, babies. Okay. I can say that my story is actually really similar to Tara's. It began as reading, which I think is true for all of us, really. But then I have a very specific memory of being in the 6th grade, and we just read Roald Dahl's Witches. And the assignment in the 6th grade to close out that unit was for each of us to write our own alternative ending. And I wrote my ending. And to this day, I have no idea what the ending was. I couldn't even begin to guess. But I remember writing it like it was second nature, drinking water, eating candy, whatever. I'm just writing this thing, and I submitted it and didn't think much about it until my parents went to parent-teacher conferences that semester, and the teacher told them that she was so engrossed with the ending that I had written that she forgot to grade it. And that stuck with me all these years later. I was 11 years old when that happened. And so, like Tara, I was writing my own books as a child. I would go on for 30 more, actually, how many years? Yeah, I guess I would go on for 30 years writing and never finishing any books. So Jawbreaker was the first book that I ever finished writing.
But no, you finished The Witches.
Oh, well, I guess don't tell Roald Dahl. Yeah, I in a way, it was probably 3 or 4 handwritten pages on lined paper. But yeah, I'd always been a writer of unfinished work in a lot of ways, with the exception of my essays that I had been writing professionally. And I think for me, it took a lot of hard work, a lot of not caring that much about rejection. I'd always been kind of smug about my products, like, oh, why wouldn't the New Yorker accept this? Like I just don't care about rejection. So it took a lot of not caring. But it also took a tremendous dose of luck and having someone seek me out because of one essay who thought it could be something more, So in that way, I think becoming a writer is also a community effort. You need people to support you. And so that's how it all happened for me, that really begins with that really distinct and vivid memory of writing an alternative ending that got such positive attention. And then the rest is I think kind of something that a lot of writers would probably relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. I love these kind of early childhood hooks into writing and how much that's changed for all of you over the years.
Sixth graders, take your assignment seriously. Take those English class assignments seriously, because you never know. In 30, 40 years, you could be talking to Maddy about how you got started. I mean, that's really, it's so simple. That's how it works.
And that's so perfect, because the exact next question I was going to ask you is what advice you'd give to current kids who are interested in writing. So Christina, is there, I think take your school assignment seriously is a good place to start. Do you want to add anything onto that?
I also don't want to sound like a stuffy, curmudgeonly teacher / adult who says, take your writing seriously. No one's going to listen to that. I think you just have to believe in yourself no matter what. That's really what it comes down to. Be smug about your products. Don't be unteachable, but believe in them. Just know that you can make something of this. That's really the best I have. It's just know that you can do it. Be a student. You have to be a student forever when you're a writer, embrace a community who can support you, and just never give up. That's really, those are my rules, I think. Yeah,
I love that. I think persistence is so important in everything that you do, but in writing particularly. Tara, do you want to add on to what your advice would be to a current aspiring writer?
Yeah, I love Christina's advice. I was talking with a group of writers recently, and I feel like we were talking about something really similar. And I said, I think you have to be a little bit delusional to go down this career path, because if you look at it logically, the numbers are not with you, right? The probability of getting an agent and getting a book deal and having that book sell enough copies and getting another book, they're not, it's not great odds. So, but if you can shut off that part of your brain and like she said, be smug, embrace the delusion that you can create something that's good enough to break through. Just keep trying, keep being persistent, and learn how to get to the end of a manuscript. Because at least Christina and I both said, it was all those decades of not actually finishing anything. Well, once we learned how to finish something, that was a really good first step towards getting published.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you, Michelle?
Yeah, I love those. And I would add, I think everyone, sees the world differently. And I think that I guess I've said this to a lot of groups of children, but I think, it's almost, I guess I would call it being honest, but it's almost honesty about how you see things in your own strange way. I think as kids, we're a little better at that kind of that honesty and I would I would say it's kind of that childlike thing where you are like, my job is to just dilly dally and kind of kind of look around and sort of, I know as a kid, you'd spend time being like, oh, get down, close to the grass and kind of looking in and seeing what was going on. And there's it's just this sort of noticing and sort of the strangeness of the world and then the strangeness of your own personality that I think as we get older, sometimes some people preserve it and they sort of can't be any other way than to just kind of be able to, figure out how to express it and sort of, and I always thought I was kind of just missing whatever part of people made them sort of try to kind of fit and, be like other writers or whatever. I sort of couldn't help but do my own style. It was and I think that those writers, a lot of times that's what happens. I think they just, it's almost like I wasn't good at impersonating other writers. So I just sort of kind of was doing my own voice. And I think that you usually have the most fun when you do that. It feels right and all of that. So I guess if I met a young writer, I would just say, just write exactly as you and just don't try to be anyone else. And whatever comes out, great. To just sort of have it be your own voice. Maybe try starting in first person, even if it's a character. But I don't know, just kind of because it'll probably be weird and different than anyone else. And those are usually my favorite things. So.
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of times young people are getting told all the time to do things in a very particular way. And it's nice to remind them that being yourself is actually a perfect way to go about things. We're getting towards the end of our time here. I do want to make sure I give each of you kind of an opportunity to close out and to promote anything that you have coming up. I think, Christina, do you want to start with, can we start with you?
Sure. I wasn't physically, I should have had this handy instead of reaching behind me. My book, Slouch, my next book, I don't know if that's showing up backward on your screen like it is mine, but we can pretend. This is coming out in 16 days. It's a follow-up, but a standalone after Jawbreaker, and it deals with another 7th grader who's really going through the trials and tribulations of being a 7th grader. So this is Slouch. It is forthcoming. And anyone who is in Michigan, there is a book party at Schuler's on November 9th. So I hope you'll keep that in mind.
Amazing. Tara, is there anything else you'd like to add or promote?
My next book is going to be a picture book. It's my 2nd picture book, and it's coming out next summer. It's called Go Baby Go, and the illustrator is Olivia Amoa. And it is about a mom and a baby out for a jog with a jogging stroller. And the mom is doing all the work, but the baby thinks that she is doing all the work. And they have a little adventure jogging around their neighborhood and seeing a lot of different things from different perspectives. So yeah, that's coming from Peachtree next summer. And then I have some other novel stuff in the works that hopefully I'll be able to talk about soon.
Oh, amazing. Can't wait to see the picture book. Such a soft spot in my heart for picture books. Michelle, how about you, my friend?
I have been being really lazy. So I'm kind of in this phase where I'm just playing with a bunch of different ideas and I feel like I kind of like audition different ideas and I'll write up some chapters and see. So I have a bunch of different things. I guess I can. Oh, also a fun thing is a couple of my books are becoming movies. This one's going to be an animated film. I can't say it hasn't been announced yet, so I can't say, but it's a great animation studio. And then the dramatics was optioned by Warner Brothers to be a mix of animated and live action. So I've been kind of having some interesting conversations about that. I guess I'll promote some books that already came out. This one, Confession of an Imaginary Friend. It's about an imaginary friend who thinks everyone ignores him and hates him. And then he finds out that he's imaginary. So it's like he thinks he's real. And then he has an existential crisis and POV from his POV. And then this is a picture book that I love. It's The Uncorker of Ocean Bottles, illustrated by Aaron Stead. And it's about an individual whose job it is to find bottles with notes in them that people have thrown out to sea, and then he travels around the world delivering them, but wishes he's very lonely. He wishes he would receive a bottle, and maybe he does. Who can say? But right now I'm just sort of playing with a bunch of fun ideas. So we'll see.
Oh, amazing. Well, congratulations to all of you on all of the amazing things you have coming up. And thank you again so much for joining us for this Authors in Conversation event. And for those of you watching, if you have not yet read these titles, please do. You can purchase them online as well through the WNBA LA's bookshop page at bookshop.org/shop/WNBALA, or you can find them in your local library. Thank you again to Christina, Tara, and Michelle for giving us some of your time today. This has been so wonderful to hear from you and to hear about your process. I think we'll close out. Thank you so much. You all,
Tara. Congratulations.
Thank you. Great job, Maddy.
Thanks. Thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of your Sunday.